least in lobby. So we should be getting over there in just a second. And they are starting the game. So let's go ahead and head on into game 1 of Osciilate versus Bl1ndBadger.
Your lucky day, SW. We've got Lissandra Swain queued up for game number 1.
That's what I like to see.
And this deck, just kind of looking at it, looking at the tools it has available, similar in a sense to Twisted Fate Swain, right? We've still got the Ice Shard, which is reminiscent of the red card from the Twisted Fate, which was always one of the big draws. We've got Bladed Ravine. That's basically just a kegged up red card. You know, we've got the new card, Whispered Word.
Did you just call Bladed Ravine a kegged up red card?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's literally no difference.
Exactly the same. Literally no difference.
None whatsoever. None.
Absolutely
just
none.
The fact that it sits on the field for the entire turn as this giant block that takes up a space has no
damage to your guys and your face, nothing. Landmark, never heard of it. Healing, irrelevant. But I mean, I've always been a big fan of Freljord's Swain decks. I think it's no secret that I've mentioned time and time again that Braum Swain was one of probably my favorite decks in all of Legends of Runeterra. Back when Braum had 1 attack, RIP 1 attack Braum can never happen again. Just because Braum Flock was such an insane combo back then. But I've always enjoyed the prospect of it, and one of the problems that it always had, as opposed to like other Swain decks like TF Swain, was how well it could hang on to cards. And now something like Whispered Words ideally solves that.
Yeah, Whispered Words, we're starting to see in almost every iteration of Noxus, right? Except for, you know, obviously like any aggro decks that we're seeing out there. Mid-range Frostbite has adapted it. This Lissandra Swain deck has adapted it. There's Shurima Noxus, you know, the, whatchamacallit. Wow, I don't know why I just blanked on their names. LeBlanc and Sivir. That, LeBlanc. They're also playing it. So this is definitely a card that was very welcome in Noxus as just that card that can keep them up in card advantage, right? Like Shurima has a bunch with Preservarium, stuff like that. So definitely good to see Noxus on that train as well.
But it's up against Shen Fiora. And I think that Lissandra, the Shadow Isle version, does get a lot done versus Shen Fiora, but that's because the Matron Watcher combo is something that's very difficult for them to answer, especially if you can manage to bring it out on curve, which generally isn't going to happen. You're not really throwing down the Lissandra until it doesn't really work out that way 9 times out of 10. But in a situation like this, you still have Ice Shard, which is one of the biggest tools for being able to pop barriers. But this is also one of the decks where Shen Fiora is going to get the most value out of its Nopifies, something that it feels like it hasn't done since Draven Ezreal or TF Swain even was in the same meta as it with Nopify. It's a card that is getting cut consistently because there's just not a lot of targets, but now you've got a wide array of choices.
Well, yeah, and Nopify is like the anti-Noxus card, right? I mean, Noxus is arguably like the class with the most useful, you know, 1, 2, and 3 cost spells. You know, we see the Death's Hand in there already. Additionally, so you had mentioned, you know, the Ice Shard as well. I really like, I mean, the reason why this deck exists is because of the interaction of, you know, possibly getting an Ice Shard alongside a Swain, you know, just being able to stun things with something like a free Ice Shard every turn as well, almost like the Sejuani type effect where it happens every turn. I really want to see that dream realized here in this matchup. I'll be kind of excited if that's the case, because that is the ultimate goal, right? And, you know, these Overwhelm units should also be able to close out the game. You know, it's interesting because when I first saw this deck, you know, we were joking about, you know, it being a little bit aggro because of the ramp and stuff like that. And then obviously Farron has the Overwhelm to kind of close out things late game with that reach. But you have these thralls. Like, you know, this obviously isn't the matron version that you were just talking about. So most, you know, you don't think of the thralls readily when you see Lissandra Swain. I don't think most people think of the thralls in general when they just see Lissandra, if it's not that strategy. But that is eventually, especially in this matchup where this game is not going to end quickly, that's going to be a problem, having that 8/8 come down for what amounts to 8 mana, or sorry, only 1 mana later on in the game.
And I think those thralls are actually going to be pivotal if Bl1ndBadger does ever want to get their hands on the Watcher. This is a list that very much plays Lissandra for her front. I mean, I'm actually a little curious about the place of Lissandra in this deck specifically, just because leveling her does seem like a challenge. And even if you are a deck that's not necessarily focused on the Watcher per se, it still looks a little bit difficult to level the Lysandra. Getting the first one down is going to go a long way. You get that Thrall on, I think it's like turn 10 or turn 11 if you throw down the Lysandra curve, and then you would imagine you're throwing down a Leviathan at some point in the game. So you will have the leveled list that gets you to this not whispering words, Ice Shard. And I don't think that like the Watcher is something that Osciillate really even has potential to get down.
No, so I think you are 100% not really going for the Watcher win con in this deck. You know, maybe in some matchups, sure. But you are more interested in getting that Lysandra level up to get that free Ice Shard every turn, right? And using it with something like a leveled Swain on board. That's going to be, like I said, that's going to be kind of that ultimate dream that's realized. But Leviathan's a good point. Even the Farron, right? Like, those are all 8 cost. You're generally going to be trying to get one of those down on turn 8, unless you're in one of those awkward stare-offs where, like, both players know you have a Leviathan and you don't want to drop it because they have a concerted strike. But we're not going to have that because we're just slapping it down on the board on turn 8 with no... Yep, no, we have a concerted strike. So we can take care of it this turn if we want between the Caretaker and the Shen. And that's always the risk of just slapping down something like Leviathan early on there. But it looks like we are going to go ahead and Golden Aegis first, which I believe we're doing to still eventually get the concerted strike off if that's the route that we go. And no, all right, we're actually just going to go with the Cythria. So interesting play from Osciillate here. This does lead us into a decent open attack, but Bl1ndBadger still has an attack to go through too. And we're passing. Okay.
Yeah, passing makes sense. The attacks don't look great here. If you just try to send out a couple of little guys, you do just get chumped by the Shen and the Cythria, or even worse, some kind of like sharp sight comes out onto the River Shaper and gets a spell. But now the Bright Steel formation comes down, and this is a disaster for Bl1ndBadger. We don't have this Swain down. Swain's very far from leveled as well, and I think that's one of the problems that Bl1ndBadger's hands ran into is this is a deck that's going to level Swain in one go. Right, one Blighted Ravine comes down, and that could just level a Swain on the spot. But we didn't get any of those AoE effects out of Badger this game.
Yeah, I haven't had any of them. And now we have the Bright Steel formation coming down too, alongside of Cythria. I mean, this is basically the dream as far as, you know, what you want to do with an attack with this barrier deck. This is the goal late game, and we've gotten there. We have it. The problem is Leviathan's still on board. There's currently, or actually, we do still have single combat to deal with the Leviathan. So if Bl1ndBadger does decide to go for a Swain, we actually have 3 single combats. We can still single combat something like even just the Bright Steel formation in and of itself, which will still survive after combat with the Leviathan. So it's going to be tricky for Bl1ndBadger to actually get it to stick here. And it looks like we're going to start with Death's Hand. I believe what is Swain at?
Swain is now at 6.
Swain's at 6 out of 12, so not quite leveled up yet. We're instead just going to go for the 1-2 punch here, get rid of the Cythria, which, I mean, feels like a lot invested just to kill one card, especially when Osciillate, A, has an Opify, but B, that's a lot of spells and a lot of cards in hand on the side of Osciillate.
Yeah, I do want to also mention this is the only Opify in Oscillate's list. We had mentioned a little bit earlier, while it is very good against Noxus, it's not good against much else, and that is why we're usually seeing it only as a one-of in a lot of these decks. But now the Swain is leveled, so we can get it down, and the Noxian Guillotine top deck is big because that is what prevents the single combat from being a safe line out of Osciillate. There is 1 Noxian Guillotine and 2 Scorched Earth in this list from Bl1ndBadger.
Right. Yep, we are going to get the Golden Aegis. And this is, I mean, man, this card is so good lately. This was, listen, I think we had this discussion before, Boulevard. When this card first came out, like, I'm sorry, but this just seemed like the biggest no-brainer of, oh, hey, Relentless Pursuit, bye-bye. Welcome Golden Aegis into this deck. I get the differences, but it just seems so damn good.
That's what I thought until last night. Some Shen Fiora player with, Mastery 5 Shen and Mastery 5 Fiora relentless pursued against me, which was annoying because he was only on 3 mana. I didn't think I had to worry about rallies anymore. And I still won because there was no barrier coming out. That barrier for 1 mana means so much. One of the best cards in Shen Fiora is Brightsteel Protector because it is such a low mana commitment for a barrier.
Yeah, that is 100% right. Now actually going to be potentially trading with the... Nope. All right, actually going to sacrifice the Swain there. I mean, Are we swapping out this Swain just to see if we could possibly maybe win with all these additional, damage procs of the Leviathan? Because that ain't happening with all this removal in hand on the side of Osciillate.
Well, not only that, but we're going into Oscillate's attack turn.
Yeah. Yeah, this feels bad.
That is a 42 attack. Caretaker.
Hey, it's only got 2 health, all right? It can still pretty easily be killed.
By what?
Anything. Anything blocking it.
Second rally.
All right,
as well.
yeah,
this is a disaster.
Oh man, this does not give me hope for good things to come, simply because that was a new deck that we don't generally see, and it was very easily taken care of by the barrier deck.
What? That means we get to see it again, right?
I guess. Wow, look who's being Mr. Positivity now. He finding the bright side. All right.
I'm not.
Look, I like it.
I'm not gonna get blindsided. Yeah, we get to see it again. Woo, Blind-Badger. You know what I actually just realized as well? Not to make. I realized as soon as I said it that I probably just shouldn't have said anything because it's gonna sound like I'm making fun of him.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely not my intention here. But if I saw this correctly, Blind-Badger is using one of the gauntlet icons, but not the 7-win gauntlet icon, one of the participation ones. And some people just do like that style, going for the more minimal one, but it's been so long since I've seen one of those.
Wow, you're making fun of the guy's style now? Is this what this has come down to?
I literally gave a preamble about this. I covered my ass. You can't hurt me.
Okay. Well, now Blind-Badger's Lysandra Swain deck is gonna have to deal with a turn 1 Zoe. I'm not gonna lie, Zoe, every time I play against Zoe, I get a tad bit tilted when my opponent has it on turn 1 because it's just a good turn 1. Nothing you can do about it. It just, unless you have a thermo beam and you're playing P and Z, it just happens and they just get the card advantage.
Look, Blind-Badger could have put Blade's Edge in the list. He deserves to not kill this Zoe.
Or, oh my god, or Hail of Blades, right? Yeah, just go ahead and throw that bad boy down.
Well, one of the wildest parts actually is the difference between the attack token on 1-on-2, because as you had mentioned, turn 1, if Osciillate has the attack token, there's almost nothing in the game that's going to deal with that Zoe. Mm-hmm. If we wait until turn 2 for Osciillate to have the attack token, Blind-Badger always gets to kill it with Death's Hand.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, this is definitely one of the prime Death's Hand targets, I gotta say. So at least got that going for us here on the side of Blind-Badger, but Equinox, Crescent Strike, and Charger. Equinox, man, I remember a day, Boulevard, where Swain Leviathan was a thing, and people played it, and it was a good deck. Or how about Bilgewater Noxus with Swain, right? That was a thing. It was a good deck. Equinox was one of the reasons why that deck cannot survive now.
Equinox was always a card that, when it found value, it was devastating, and now, as Targon has gone down the road of getting more and more things that give us access to that pool, because originally it was just Spacey Sketcher, then we got Zoe, and now we have the Fangs as well as Star-Tipped Peak. There's just a lot of things that give us access to the Equinox that we didn't have previously, and more decks that lose out to that are getting exposed. The prime example, I think, from this meta or the last one is Teemo Sejuani. If your Ballistic Bot or your Puffcap Peddler or any of those things get turned off, it is a totally different game for you.
All right, so Osciillate now. I mean, not gonna lie, there's not a lot of proactivity in Oscillate's hand. Maybe this is where Blind-Badger's deck can pick up a win. I mean, Fangs is about as proactive as it gets here, and then everything else is Celestial Generation that's going to take a little while to actually ramp up here. There is that Veiled Temple to worry about. We could just cycle here, play the Guiding Touch, that cantrip, as we all know that Boulevard loves, and get the proc on there. So, ooh. Now, this is interesting. It's not every day we actually get a Veiled Temple destroyed.
And I like it. I like killing the Veiled Temple on site. Unfortunately, still going to be able to get at least a little bit of use out of it, but this Veiled Temple is one of the big ways that the way that Targon Bilgewater plays right now, and one of the reasons that it's so boring to watch, is because it doesn't really main deck a win condition. While it can win with some of the cards in the main deck if they get big enough, for the most part, you are just infinitely stalling out until you Star Shaping or Mountain Scryer into a win con. And Veiled Temple giving you this giant wall of a unit makes it so easy to stall things out, regardless of what it is. Even if it's like a 10-10 Solari Priestess, it's still something that stalwarts a lot of your opponent's aggression.
Yeah, I think that's the common complaint about this deck, right? Like, where's the win condition? Like, I promise it's in there. It's in there somewhere. It just takes a little while to get to it. But already having this Equinox, you know, we grabbed this early on. I really am having a hard time finding a way that Bl1ndBadger actually gets into this game to win it, right? Like right now, Bl1ndBadger is in a good spot. But once we start throwing things down like Captain Farron and Leviathan and having them basically negated by a 1-mana card, like that's what feels bad, right? You're investing 8 mana into such a ginormous card only to have your opponent be like, get that out of here, 1 mana. Like sure, the body sticks around, but you're not necessarily playing it for the body. You want that effect.
Yeah, I would not pay 8 mana for a 5/8.
No.
And like, if you just got rid of the effect and left me Overwhelm, I have some room to play the game. 5 attack Overwhelm is still pretty threatening, but the fact that it just wipes everything. And one of the big things is like, there's no way to unsilence a unit. At least, well, there actually is. Let me say that there actually is. If you can Lyssandra's spell onto your Leviathan, you can. No, even then, it resummons an exact copy, right? So it'll still be silenced.
What summons an exact copy?
Lyssandra's Tomb?
Yes. Yeah. It summons an exact copy.
Okay, yeah, even then we can't do it. Man, that sucks.
Yep. So it's pretty bad. You could entomb. Well, are you saying entomb in response to the Equinox?
No, I'm saying like it's
after the fact.
Equinox.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like reset it because I know like in Hearthstone that something like that would work. Chronicler of Ruin would like unsilence something, but if it's summoning an exact copy, it's not going to work, and that just makes it feel even worse.
Well, I guess how many? Oh man, you know, it's really just going to come down to that. Then we're almost definitely not going to have it by the time turn 8 rolls around, which is what I mean by have it is a Lysandra on field and 1 in hand to get the entomb. So one of these Equinoxes is going to go off, so maybe we can prevent it in the future, but that's the least of our concerns because there is also a Great Beyond that's going to be an issue. We do have the Arachnoid Sentry. We can get rid of the Spell Shield. I mean, I think there's some ways for Bl1ndBadger to deal with this, but it's just not looking great.
If Bl1ndBadger is cognizant of the Equinox and is actually worried about that, you could start off the turn with Captain Farron instead and see if that 8/8 body is threatening enough to get a silence out of Osciillate. It might be, it might not be, but at the end of the day, if your Farron comes down and your opponent doesn't silence that and doesn't deal with it in any way, I think that's still something that you're going to be okay with. But I feel like Osciillate probably just going to match that with a Great Beyond.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we find yet another Equinox if we want it. Things looking real rough for our hero Bl1ndBadger.
And that was my concern. Because, you know, we're talking about the entomb and all that, but we have like unlimited access at this point to Equinoxes. Not unlimited, I mean, you have to RNG it into your hand, but generally speaking, it's not too hard for this deck to find an Equinox. If you want it, you just got to pick it. And now we got 2. I think that all but solidifies this game. I mean, now we're dealing with 2 out of the, 3 Leviathans that we have? Yeah. And like you said, Captain Farron could come down, but we got 6 lifesteal on board. I don't think we really care about a Captain Farron coming down, especially if we can actually buff this Fangs up to 8 attack and just straight up block it.
Yeah, almost certainly not.
Star Tip Peak. Boulevard. Do you like this card?
No.
What? You're always so quick and decisive with it. You don't even think about it. Like,
because I've already thought about it.
Can we persuade you?
I need you to understand how much time I spend thinking about Legends of Runeterra.
Oh no, trust me, I know. So why don't you like it?
I think that for the most part, when I'm getting a card that a Celestial, rather, the cost 3 or less, like I don't love excuse me, I don't love getting it off like Spacey Sketcher. When I get it off Zoe or Aphelios, I'm using it as like a supplementary tool where I get to pick the tool that best fits my situation, right? If I need a Moonglow, I can grab that. If I need Equinox, I can grab it. Star Tipped Peak, the randomness that it provides means that I could get a really bad one Because a lot of times when you play something like the Fangs or Zoe or Spacey Sketcher, it's very obvious which of these cards do nothing for you in that situation.
Yeah.
And then you narrow it down to the playable ones and you grab that. The fact that this one can give me unplayable cards and doesn't give me a body alongside it, because at least like Spacey Sketcher can block a Brightsteel formation if I need it to. Not Star Tip Peak can't do that. I just think that like the randomness on top of not giving a body just makes it not worth it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think the idea is that it only costs 2, and like a super cool star chart costs 2, but this is getting you 2 instead of 1. But then the drawback is that, okay, it's random. But I think that drawback of it being random is actually incredibly big. Like you said, you could just get something that's completely useless. But we are going to at least level up the Swain. We saw it. It happened. We at least level up the Swain here in this matchup on the side of Bl1ndBadger. Now can we get the dream, which is Leviathan? And I don't think it's going to happen. I think we might even lose our Swain here. And then even if the Leviathan comes down, we get 2 Equinoxes on backup here. This is not looking good for Bl1ndBadger. We actually don't have... All right, technically we can Noxian... This is not a bad Noxian Guillotine. There's a lot of damaged units. We can't, unfortunately, Noxian Guillotine the Fangs on the attack either. So yeah, it looks like we are just going to go ahead and block it. But yeah, we are going to save the Swain. And eventually going to be able to use this Noxian Guillotine to also take out the Mountain Scryer.
It's risky, but yeah, Oscillate's going to go for it. There's no additional damage spell in Badger's hand to force through the Noxian Guillotine, and now this is just a complete and total disaster. Our follow-up play is going to have to be either the Leviathan or the Captain Farron, but Osciillate, as we had mentioned, still has those Equinoxes available, and Osciillate has managed to hang on to the entire board here.
Oh, that feels so bad. Not only do we know on the side of Osciillate, we're never going to let Bl1ndBadger stick a Leviathan. We couldn't even keep our Swain around. Yeah. This is not good. Is this why the lineup is the lineup, Boulevard? Are we seeing it?
There's a reason that like as much as I don't enjoy casting it and I don't really enjoy watching it, I'm never going to recommend that you bring something else because it is just better than everything else. There's a reason that it's the lineup. Can you top with other things? Absolutely. We're not seeing a 16 out of 16 representation on these decks. But it is just a lot stronger than everything else.
Well, it's the consistency, right? I mean, that's always the give and take with a card game is like as an example, we talked about discard aggro earlier. You could easily win a tournament with discard aggro if you just freaking drew really well the entire game. Like,
yeah, like you can win any Yu-Gi-Oh tournament with Exodia if you just open 5 pieces every single opening hand, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop you.
Well, when you put it like that, I think it's not discard aggro is not quite Exodia, but you know, I think the probability. Actually, it's probably not too different. The probability of drawing all 5 Exodia versus 5 like good starts for discard aggro. But yeah, now we're at the point too where this is just insult to injury Boulevard. Oscillate's hand and field is insane. I mean, there's too many answers to everything. You have all these random units on field too that can chump block if needed. They can go in for lethal and just start putting pressure if needed. And this is I will say, all right, here's the positive point. We played Equinox on Farron. All right, that's 1 Equinox down. It's about the most Bl1ndBadger I think can hope for right now. Maybe we get the second Leviathan to stick now, but it's still not looking good because when that does happen eventually, Osciillate will be sticking that Great Beyond.
And that Great Beyond is how many times Great Beyond finishes the game might just be like one of our most said sentences in all of Runeterra because for as long as we've been casting, the meta has shifted and all these different top decks have shifted. One thing that has not shifted is Great Beyond ending the game. That has always been relevant and prevalent in some kind of deck since the release of Targon.
Yeah, I mean, lately, we talked about this before too. Lately, I feel like Destroyer has actually ended more games than we're used to it seeing. That we're used to seeing it end.
The shine is there are a lot of elusive 1 HP units running around.
But generally speaking, yeah, I agree with you. You know, Great Beyond is just it's an elusive with Spell Shield. When you put elusive and Spell Shield on the same body, what do you think is going to happen? And that's what happens. You get Great Beyond. Oh, and another Celestial Generation tool too. I mean, the train is not stopping here. Even got that Living Legends in hand at reduced cost, no less, thanks to the Mountain Scryer. So looking like this could be a pretty... We could actually play Solari Priestess. Oh, no, we would be... No, that would be enough. Yeah, we could play Solari Priestess into Living Legends, but we're going to do Crescent Strike first. And it looks like this might be a little bit of a push for lethal here.
I'm surprised that we went for Crescent Strike first rather than, say, our Great Beyond, just because what's his name? The Captain Farron was already stunned. So we throw down the Great Beyond, our opponent plays a unit, and then we Crescent Strike both of them. It doesn't matter. The Great Beyond is big enough, and we are just going to see a surrender out of Blind-Badger. Unfortunately, the hero of our day so far running this Lissandra and Swain deck just not going to be able to get it done.
The hero is going down.
Look, he died a hero. And maybe Blind-Badger is going to live long enough to see himself become the villain, but today he dies a hero.